So you can tell that this is maybe a thermometer. If you've been to a medical appointment, I've been to the dentist quite a lot lately. Every time I go into the dentist, when they first started, they would put a thing against my head, and now they're telling me to give them my wrist. And those things and this thing are thermometers, and they are used to tell us the temperature of something, right? It tells you how cold or hot anything is. Now, I have another picture. Here's the other picture. Let's see if you can see this. This is something that I thought, oh, maybe I could have them in person, but this you'd probably have to take off a wall. Do you have this in your house somewhere? I'll bet you do. It's a thermostat. Do you have a thermostat? A thermostat tells you how warm or cold something is in your house, right? So what's the difference? My question for you today. What's the difference between these two things? Thermometer, thermostat. They both say how hot or cold something is, right? But only a thermostat will do something about it. If a thermometer measures that you have a fever, okay, not this kind, but the kind you put in your mouth or on your wrist, it can't do anything about it, can it? It can tell you that you have a fever, but that's it. A thermostat, if there is, well, no, it doesn't do much for your fever, but if you're in your house and your thermostat says it's too hot or it's too cold, it tries to do something about it, right? It can turn off your furnace or turn on your furnace, or if you're one of those people who also has air conditioning, it can turn that on and off. So, thermostat, thermometer, my question for the day is, which one are you more like? Do you have any ideas? I think sometimes I might like a thermometer. I can observe a situation and I can size it up, and then I can't do anything more about it. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it's good to be that way. Sometimes problems aren't ours to fix, are they? And sometimes it's really helpful not to fix somebody else's problem, especially if they haven't asked you to. If they just start trying to tell you about a problem, you can help them size it up. But maybe they don't want you to fix it, right? So sometimes you need to be a thermometer. And sometimes we just don't know how to fix something. If my furnace is broken, I can't fix it. I don't know how. I haven't been taught. So sometimes when we're being a thermometer, we have to be patient. And that can be hard. Waiting is hard. We know how hard it is to wait right now and be patient when we can't go and do all the things we'd like to do. Okay, sometimes when I'm acting like a thermometer, I should really be more like a thermostat and do something about the problem that I notice. When you have too many thermometers and no thermostats, nothing gets better. And lots of times when I think at first I don't know how to solve a problem, I discover that if I try, I can do more things than I think. This morning, I turned on the news to see what was going on in the world, and there came on this news thing about a little girl from India. She's 9 years old, and she was very concerned about what was happening in her home country of India. And so she decided, because of all the people dying and all the cases of COVID, and so she decided that she was going to take all of her allowance and money that she has saved from other places, and she was going to see if she could purchase an oxygen, what they call it, an oxygen concentrator for our hospital. And so then she started some GoFundMe kinds of stuff, and she used all of her social media contacts and things like that. And so she has purchased an oxygen concentrator for a hospital, and now she's raising money for more oxygen concentrators. She's 9 years old, but she is clearly a thermostat, right? So a thermometer can size up a situation, doesn't try to fix it. Which of those things is easiest for you, do you think? Are you more like a thermometer or a thermostat? The hardest thing for us these days is probably to figure out when we should be a thermometer and when we should be a thermostat. When it's time for us to stand down and when it's time for us to step up. Jesus' friends had this problem, this exact problem, when it was time for them to leave, for him to leave them. Okay, maybe not about the thermometer thermostat, but it was the same problem. Jesus tells his friends when he's with them whether it's time to be thermometer or thermostat. But then he left, he went away, and they had to figure it out on their own just by remembering what he taught them and what they learned together. And so that's what we need to do too. Why we need each other to help remember what we've learned so we can figure out whether to be thermostats or thermometers. So the next time you have a problem in your household, I wonder if you could talk together about whether the problem requires a thermostat or a thermometer, or which of you needs to be which. What's the best answer for the problem? And then, if you're willing, tell me how it goes so that we can keep learning about all these things together. Well, the Bible story, known as the Ascension, always reminds me of Mary Poppins, when at the end, Mary prepares to leave her charges, Jane and Michael Banks, having brought healing and joy to a dysfunctional family. And then the family's going to prepare to fly a kite, and Mary rises into the air as the wind buoys up her immense black umbrella. And on the ground, the chimney sweep Bert watches her sail up, up, and away. And he winks at her, and he says, "Goodbye, Mary Poppins. Don't stay gone too long." It's a story that makes a great film, but it doesn't fit too well with our understandings of the ways that things work in real life. The story goes, right, that Jesus died, and then there came all of these other accounts that he'd risen from the dead. The disciples had all of these experiences where he appeared to them, spent time with them, ate fish with them, walked with them. He continued to teach them stories and tell their meanings. And then one day, he was lifted up and carried away by the clouds. Those who were with him watched the sky. They waited and they watched, kind of the way you watch a balloon that has escaped and is flying away. They watched and they waited, wondering what might happen next. Such stories made sense in their day, actually, perhaps when the world was flat, because if you thought the earth was flat, it was easy to point to where God lived. God was up, beyond the dome. It was partly the dome, in fact, they felt, holding back the chaos that seemed so close in the early world. And so, when you have to explain the fact that Jesus has risen, but isn't really concretely visible so that you can prove it, as in he's right there, it was easy to speak about Jesus having ascended to where God lived, back beyond the dome of the sky. Well, in 2021, it's not so easy to speak of the notion of the ascension, because now that we know what we know about astronomy and space, to speak of Jesus ascending doesn't quite work. Gone up where? We're up from a ball. Also, given we now know about the size of the universe, ascension gets us into all kinds of problems about, well, how far, how high, which galaxy? As a concept, the physical ascension idea is really almost unworkable in our day. It's the stuff of science fiction movies, perhaps, or fairy tales where imagination is more important than fact. But I think whether or not the story is factual doesn't matter so much as whether or not it is true. And what was true for the disciples was that while Jesus' ministry could live on in new ways, Jesus, the person, was no longer with them. And we can relate to those disciples worn out from the emotional upheaval of it all. We can imagine as they watch Jesus, the one in whom they've invested their hopes and their energy and their future, disappear as if in a puff of smoke. No wonder they stood and stared at the sky. No one could blame the disciples for just standing, and wondering if what they'd experienced was reality, wondering what now? In fact, I think this is actually a very good story for this community, in this world, at this time. The prevalence of conspiracy theories rampant in our world almost prove how unbelievable the circumstances of our world in the last year have been. Most of us could never have imagined anything like this, which is maybe why governments appear to be constantly unprepared for whatever happens next, because nobody could imagine it. And so what comes next, we really don't know. All we can do is sort of wait and see. Well, as they are waiting and seeing in the Bible story, the disciples encounter some strangers who say, "What are you doing? Why are you gazing up into space?" Why? Why indeed? That question resounds in our modern world. We know the truth of how waiting feels, that feeling of knowing that something has ended, not knowing when or what, whether something might begin. That feeling of looking out into space, waiting for something, but not sure exactly what. That's been our reality for a long time. This week, as vaccine eligibility opened rapidly to include all adults and then everybody over age 12, I know there was some frustration on computer sites as people waited in long lines and the online system struggled to keep up with the demand. Several times, I'm sure people were met with what I sometimes call that spinning wheel of death. It's that sign your computer is processing things, so you just have to wait. You don't know for how long. Looks something like this. Buffering. Buffering in its most simple terms is when your device pauses mid-task and your system kind of puts you on hold until enough data is downloaded to allow everything to proceed. And while it is an annoying interruption, it's one of those things meant to help things move more fluidly, right? It occurs to me that people also need buffering time. We are bombarded with information. Our heads are full of the news we read, the wisdom we absorb, the questions we have, the concerns we have about our family, our money, people's behavior around us, health, our ideas, our feelings. And for some of us, the buffering happens while we sleep, happens in our dreams. Have any of you had very strange dreams this last year? Some of us, it just keeps awake. And some of us find that it all just gets mixed together and goes around and around and around and never stops. In those moments comes the voice, "Why are you gazing into space?" We're buffering. Rob Bell talks about the art of disruption. He notes that sometimes things happen in life that are so unusual, so disorienting, that they change all the rules about what we understand to be normal. We suffer. Maybe a loved one leaves or reveals a secret. Our health status shifts. We get the results, or someone dies. And those kind of things turn everything upside down, and whatever we had planned for tomorrow is just off the table. Why are you gazing into space? Disruption. And in these moments of buffering and disruption, sometimes we feel immobile. And all we can do is stare at the empty sky. But what these strangers want the disciples to know is that there are also other options for their waiting time, other than simply staring immobile. It's their turn to do the work of the Spirit, you see. So that's when I want to return to the metaphors I spoke about earlier of the thermostat and the thermometer. In a waiting time, we can often be good thermometers. We can step back. It can be easier for us to set and see some boundaries. We can size up situations around us and let others learn without swooping in to solve their problem for them. We can let people take the time they need rather than having us just decide it's easier if I do it myself. On the other hand, times of buffering and disruption can give us a creative window to step up as a thermostat that can respond to something in a new way we've never considered before. Because when we're forced to abandon our old habits, and if my gazing into the sky is simply an avoidance of something that's going to be hard, or cause people to be annoyed, or cause conflict, I'm not embracing the opportunity that comes with disruption. Those changes we would never choose, but are possible because we don't really have a choice. They are now ways to respond to the temperature that we have taken. And what the disciples are reminded of is that even when you don't have a clue what's coming next, there is still much on this earth that can take our attention, on which we may focus. Annie Dillard writes, "Who shall ascend to the hill of God? There is no one but us. There is no one to send, nor a pure heart on the face of the earth, but only us. A generation comforting ourselves with the notion that we have come at an awkward time. But there is no one but us. There never has been. In this waiting time, here and now, there is no one but us. Disrupted, we can stand looking up to an empty sky, and we can become the clouds of witnesses that continue to work with the Spirit in ways new to us and to the world around us, but no less powerful. And so we wait. How we spend our waiting time, now that is up to us. Amen.